states, why were they in a position of adapting from slave trade to legitimate trade? What were the reasons? So these reasons include number one, the closeness to the coast, the distance to the close to the coast. It was so near. So the nearest coast now led these states to be in a position of adapting from slave trade to legitimate trade. This is the problems of transport. So they did not have transport problems. So doing now, it was easy for them to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Which were these coastal states? We talk about Dahomey State. We also talk about Niger Delta states. The Niger Delta states included the Calabar state. We also got Boni state. We also got Eritrean. The Eritrean people now, they were in a position of adapting from slave trade to legitimate trade. And lastly, we've got the Brass people. So the Niger Delta states, which included the Calabar, the Boni, the Eritrean, the Brass people now, it was easy for them to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Number two, let's talk about able leaders. The people in Dahomey, we see that they were so much blessed in the sense that their leaders, they were able, they were capable. These leaders were in a position of expanding palm tree production. Palm tree productivity in the Dahomey state, it expanded. And we also see that the people in Dahomey, they had a well-structured economical system. They also had a well-structured political and social system that again working to their advantage, moving from slave trade to legitimate trade. The people also led by King Gezo and King Glele. So these kings, King Glele and King Gezo, they were also well organized. They had a minister of agriculture. You can imagine long ago, having a minister of agriculture who was responsible for organizing palm production. That on its own, it worked to the advantage of these kings, King Glele and also King Gezo. It is also said that Kope, T-O-K-P-E, even took census of the palm tree. He knew the number of palm trees that were in his state. He knew the palm trees that were supposed to be planted. He knew the palm trees that were supposed to be harvested. Having a well-structured economical system now, it explains why these states do not have challenges adapting from slave trade to legitimate trade. And it was also said that these leaders, they set up companies that process palm trees. So the companies that were processing the palm oil production, not palm tree, but palm oil production. It is said that in the Niger Delta state, leaders such as Janja of Opobo was able to speak English. He was able to speak English long ago. He was like, hey, I know you are a white man. You want this one. I speaking English long ago. It works to the advantage of Janja of Opobo. And it is said that he traded directly with Europe. He did not need middlemen, but he directly traded with Europe. So that on its own, it works to the advantage of this Janja of Opobo who was in the Niger Delta state. So we are seeing why it was not all that difficult to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Janja of Opobo, he maximized the profits that he got. Why? Because he did not use a middleman in his trade. Number three, let's talk about the availability of substitute product. The availability of substitute product, again, it made it easy for these states to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. States such as Dahomey, once again, states in the Niger Delta states, we see that they were located in the palm tree belt. Their locations were to the advantage of them. They were located in the palm tree belt. The forest of palm tree that grew naturally in their areas. So palm trees, they were growing naturally in their areas. So it was to their advantage. again, added to that now, the soil types, the climatical conditions allowed them to produce palm trees that were needed in the production of oil. So it became easier for them to adjust from slave trade to legitimate trade. It is also said that the palm trees in the Dahomey, they were always counted, and Hoppe took census of the palm trees. Again, like what was already said about Hoppe, having census, having data on the palm trees that were there, working advantage to the Dahomey people. So it was easy again to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. In Senegal, we also see that the knowledge and the productivity or production of groundnuts, and also the soils allowed the growth of variety of groundnuts in Senegal. So that again working well to the people in Senegal, adopting from slave trade to legitimate trade. Number four, let's talk about good links with Europeans. Europeans, we see that they assisted Dahomey and Niger Delta states in cash production. So these states now, they were assisted by the whites, they were assisted by the Europeans, that is the Niger Delta states and also Dahomey. Europeans, it is said that they gave farming ideas and paid good prices for the legitimate products, and also they provided transport that was needed to carry these products. So that again, it worked to the advantage of these states. They were so much connected to the Europeans, they were so much connected to the whites, and that again explains why it wasn't difficult for them to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Number five, we talk about the presence of navigable rivers. The presence of navigable rivers again explains why it was easy to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Niger Delta states, you remember those Delta states that we talked about, it is said that they had many navigable rivers, such as the Niger River and also the Kwa Ibo, KWA, the Kwa Ibo River, and also the Calabar and the Boni River. These rivers now provided them with water. So by so doing, it was easy for them to water their plants, and it made it easy for them again to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Dahomey, it is said that it had only one navigable river, the Imo River, which was used to transport legitimate products to the coast. So in the Dahomey now, we are seeing that they had a navigable river, the Imo River, IMO, the Imo River, which was used to transport legitimate products to the coast. So we are seeing in the Dahomey, they are having this navigable river. In the Niger Delta states, they are also having so many of these rivers which were used to provide water for their or from their palm trees. Then the presence of the navigable rivers, it made it possible for these states to transport legitimate products to the coast. Number six, let's talk about the availability of cheap labor. Availability of cheap labor, again, it explains why these states were able to adapt from slave trade to legitimate trade. Dahomey and Niger Delta states, it is said that they converted slaves to labor slaves. So slaves now, they were now convicted, they convicted now, they became what? Labor slaves, whereby they were supposed to provide labor, they were supposed to work in the palm oil plantations, providing labor, doing labor in the palm oil plantations. It is said also that they also processed the palm oil slave, they also processed the oil, and they also rolled drums of oil to the coast. So when the oil was processed, it was now their duty to roll these drums to the coast. So we have seen that these states in the Niger Delta states and also Dahomey, they were able to adapt well from slave trade to legitimate trade. Why? Because of several reasons that we have talked about. We talked about the closeness to the coast. We talked about the issue of air links with the Europeans are playing an important part in making sure that their states continued, even if a slave trade had been banned in 1807. So that is what